Hi everyone, my name's MadMatt Lugos and welcome back to The Last of Us Part 2. Last time we met the Rattlers and now we are trying to find Abby in their hideout as she's likely been taken as slave here. We're getting close to the end. Let's keep going guys, off we go. Don't know if we're going to run into more of these Rattlers, these snakes, whatever they're called. But yeah. I've been playing this game almost exclusively at night, but I'm actually playing it in the morning this time. So I don't know if that's going to make a difference. I really don't know. The amount of resources we just got would suggest some more combat, but... Looks like we're close to the slave quarters, right? Yeah. Why would you use a baseball bat?
Kill her! Bitch! I got the key! I locked the door! The guns! Move! Alright, come on, let's go!
Hey, where's Abby? She's bit!
Keep back!
Hey, don't put that fucking thing in me!
Hey! Abby tried to escape. She's down in the pillars.
The pillars?
Head down to the beach. You won't miss it. She's probably already dead. Come on!
What about Lev though? Yeah, we're not doing too hot now. Probably internal bleeding, right?
Abby.
Lev probably went with her, right? The pillars, maybe they string them up there.
Head to the beach.
Let's hope it's a straight shot. Yeah, they bet they probably leave them there to get eaten by infected or something.
Holy.
Jesus, man.
Abby?
Looks alive to me. Bet Lev is somewhere. Is that not her? This is a bit of a bait and switch, right? Open your eyes.
It's you. Abby. I got you. I got you. They're both this way.
So 2 months she's been locked up here. And maybe been strung up there for a day, maybe 2. She looked pretty drawn out, right? Which is what intense dehydration would do to you. Ellie's not looking too hot here though. I still don't trust Abby to not try and kill Ellie here, but you know, we know what she would have done to Dina. She's going to make us an offer to come to the Fireflies right now.
I can't let you leave. I'm not doing this. No. I'm not gonna fight you. Yes, you will. He's not a part of this. You made him a part of this. Okay. Okay.
think Lev's going to get up at some point.
Go. Just take him.
They're not here anymore, Ellie. Okay. That continues the theme of me getting every single story prediction wrong throughout the entire playthrough, right? Ellie didn't turn herself over to the fireflies, they weren't even mentioned. She's gone back to Jackson, Ellie. Couldn't expect her to stay here on her own. Everything's gone. And I hope Ellie goes back to Jackson, right? I mean, because, you know, we're dealing with acute PTSD here. I mean, with the mental state she's in, you have to wonder whether suicide's in her mind here, right? I suppose if it was, she wouldn't have come back. Maybe this room will be untouched. Some of Joel's carvings were here, I didn't notice them last time. string needs replacing.
What are you drinking?
Coffee.
Where'd you get that?
Those people that came through last week.
Oh.
A little embarrassed as to what I had to trade to get it, but it's not bad.
I had Seth under control.
Yeah, I know.
And you need to stop harassing Jesse about my patrols.
Okay. Dina. Is she your girlfriend?
No. No, that was just one kiss. It doesn't mean anything. I don't know why she did that.
But you do like her.
So stupid.
Look, I have no idea what that girl's intentions are, but I do know that she would be lucky to have you.
You're such an asshole.
I'm not trying to.
I was supposed to die in that hospital. My life would have fucking mattered. But you took that from me.
If somehow the Lord gave me a second chance at that moment, I would do it all over again.
Yeah. I don't think I can ever forgive you for that. But I would like to try.
I'd like that.
Okay. see you around.
Yep.
Okay, guys. I'm gonna let the credits roll. I'll have a little chat afterwards.
just a poor, wayfaring stranger traveling through this world of woe. There is no sickness, no toil, nor danger in that bright land to which I go. I'm going there to see my mother. She said she'd meet me when I come. I'm just a-going over Jordan. I'm just a-going over home. I know dark clouds will gather round me. I know my way is rough and steep, but beauteous fields lie just before me, where God's redeemed their vigils keep. I'm going there to see my father. I'm going there, no more to roam. I'm just a-going over Jordan. I'm just a
trial, this body read in the old churchyard. I'll drop this cross of self-denial and go singing home to God. I'm going there to see my Savior. I'm going there, no more to roam. I'm just a going over Jordan. I'm just a going over home. I'm just a going over Jordan. I'm just a going over home. I'm just a going.
Okay, guys, that is going to bring us to the end. So I'm actually a few days removed from the ending at this point, and I'm recording this roughly a week before this is going to get uploaded. I ended up getting pretty far ahead of my uploads in the end. But yeah, this is about 4 days after finishing the game. I had plenty of thoughts straight after finishing, and I still have most of those thoughts and opinions. I just thought it was best to make some notes and, you know, make some ideas a bit more coherent, especially with a game that seems to be bringing out some kind of over-the-top opinions and stuff. So yeah. Before we get into any opinions on the game, guys, I just need to make a little disclaimer, just because sometimes the last video in a series, some people come just to see your reaction to the end, see your opinion. So if you're one of those people, just so you know, I've played this game as blind as possible. I only watched the first few trailers from last year, and I've been completely blissfully unaware of any leaks, any story spoilers. I played this game in a bubble. I've tried to have a real genuine experience. So this is my unmolested opinion about The Last of Us Part 2. I've really tried not to let anyone taint my view, my opinion of this experience. So there's my disclaimer. I have been aware of the somewhat slightly negative tone and vibe surrounding the game at times. It's crept through in the comment section of my videos as well. There's been I don't know, people seem very territorial about certain parts of this game, even though I feel like I've remained pretty objective about it. I really haven't been taking sides with the characters or the story, and it's not because I don't have opinions about it. Some parts of the story just didn't bring much of a reaction from me. But yeah, before I get into my opinion on the whole experience and everything overall, let's just comment a bit on the ending there. Okay, so a very miserable ending, really, particularly for Ellie. Not necessarily for Abby and Lev, as we can see here from this end screen. This would suggest that Abby and Lev have found their way to the Firefly's new base, and they've made contact and they have a new home. That's what this would suggest. Ellie's story, on the other hand, I feel has some much darker implications. I mean, first, we had the flashback with Joel on his porch, and we got an insight as to why Ellie has been so tortured over Joel's death, outside of the obvious, you know, horror of seeing him die like that. More because she'd finally decided to try and forgive him, to reconcile, and it's really fueled her quest for revenge, that kind of those unresolved emotions, those just unresolved feelings that she never got to explore. And this whole mission for revenge has really been like a misguided quest for catharsis, really. She was seeking catharsis with Joel and she never got it. So the idea of it wasn't really revenge she was looking for. She thought that's what it was, but that's not really what was driving her. And I didn't like the fact that she had to lose her fingers. I mean, really, she can't even play the guitar. The rest of it wasn't bad enough, but fair enough. And as I said at the end there, given everything she's been through and the fact that they're making these kind of clumsy depictions of post-traumatic stress disorder, everything she's been through, and the fact that she's on her own now, you know, she's at a definite suicide risk. And that's one thought that I did have, that the fact that she left the guitar behind, she left all her stuff behind, and she was walking to the woods. And that has some pretty dark implications. She might be going into the woods to put this whole saga to an end. But we don't know. We don't know what's happened to either of them. They've, you know, you don't get any happy endings. Most good fiction doesn't have happy wrapped up endings. Not necessarily happy endings, because this isn't a happy game. It's more just, you know, good fiction tends to, if you want to have a believable story, a believable ending doesn't have full stops or periods, as you'd say in America, at the end, right? And the life continues, then you don't know where it's going to go. So we don't know that Ellie perhaps has committed suicide. I feel like that's what it was suggesting, especially with the mental illness part of it. But she could quite easily be going back to Jackson, or she might just be wandering and finding her own way in the world. Because Dina did kind of make it seem like she wasn't going to do it again. But maybe I don't think you necessarily need to believe that Dina meant that wholeheartedly. She might have just, that might have been her last ploy to try and get Ellie to stay. She might not really have meant that wholeheartedly. So yeah, that's where it seems like we're at in the ending. And my overall thoughts on the game. I'll get into specifics and everything. I've made notes. I'll try and not do this too long, but no promises. But yeah, I've enjoyed it, guys. It's been a good experience. I've been compelled to play all the way through. I've wanted to, you know, see where this was all going. And you know, I'd find it hard to believe that anyone regards this as like a bad game or a disaster, you know? Just judging from some of the tone of some of the comments that I've seen on some of my videos, feels like people are being very reactionary and stuff. So I don't think that it would be regarded as a bad game, but equally, I would also find it a little hard to believe that anyone regards this as like a masterpiece. You know, for a multitude of reasons both ways. I just think that it's quite flawed, and I think it gets a few things wrong that just hold it back a little bit. I don't think it's, like I said, I don't think it's a disaster, but I just think it trips up a few times, and it's not in the way that you're thinking, okay? Because I feel like there are very obvious criticisms that I've picked up on in the comments, and the things that I dislike about this, not dislike, but I'm a bit indifferent towards, aren't really anything to do with those things, aren't to do necessarily with the character arcs or anything. So let's get into some specifics, guys. And now this is going to be a little bit divisive to try and keep you watching if you really love the game. You know, I've learned some lessons from Neil Druckmann. I'm going to give the bit that you really want first. So let's give some positives. I'm going to go through all the stuff that I liked, that they excelled at, that I enjoyed personally, and I will try and make it clear that I feel like some things are objective points that I feel like are general truths, but some things are more personal to me, things that I liked that you might have liked yourself, might just be personal differences. Okay, so technically, I mean, the game looks gorgeous, right? Horrifying at times. It's not a technical marvel, but it's a linear game. It looks pretty. It looks terrifying in the horror sections. The voice work, the voice acting is top notch. Some real high level voice acting here. Animations are really facial animations, the lip syncing, all really well done. Personally, I still enjoyed the gameplay loop. You know, it hasn't evolved tremendously, but it's got a few new wrinkles that allow you to approach scenarios, gameplay sections, combat sections, stealth sections from a multitude of different angles and approaches. You know, going prone, some of the levels were much more open and linked, and the melee combat was a bit deeper with the quick dodges and the sequence of strikes. And there were some small upgrades to the crafting, like the silencer and things of that nature. But, you know, if I could understand if you felt like the gameplay hasn't evolved enough, considering the previous game came out 7 years ago, was it now? Maybe you feel like it feels a bit outdated. I don't feel that way. I still enjoyed the gameplay loop. I enjoy looting and scavenging for the supplies and all that kind of stuff. But, you know, if you weren't in love with the gameplay from the first game, this would probably get quite repetitive. But not for me. I still really enjoyed it. The only thing I suppose I still dislike, I disliked it in the first game, is the movement style. I feel like it's a little bit unresponsive, it's a little bit sticky, but also at the same time a bit floaty. Yeah, I wasn't a fan of the movement style in the first game or any of the Uncharted games, and it's the same here. I'd like them to move that on a bit, but we'll have to see for next time. So an element of their storytelling that I've always really liked, that Naughty Dog in particular still does really well, is the way is just there are a lot of really emotional, sentimental moments in the game, like small interactions that just feel extremely personal, right? That really bring you in, that are really believable, in those small moments. You know, if we think back, I think of Joel playing that song right at the start of the game. Think about Ellie and Dina's first kiss. Think about Dina telling Ellie about her family while they were in the synagogue, about the Jewish history and things like that. I think about Owen and Abby exploring the aquarium for the first time. I really like the way we got to see their relationship build up. Think about Tommy strumming the guitar with that cheeky smile on his face while we were at the ski lodge. I think about Ellie playing the guitar and playing the songs, even though it was sometimes a bit somber. And just there were plenty of other small interactions between characters, whether it was in cutscenes or whether it was while we were exploring the world when we had a partner. They still do that really, really well. It always pulls you in, and it always feels very intimate, and that continues here. And that leads me to something that they didn't really have in the first game that I really enjoyed here, and that was the memories, the flashbacks for both characters, particularly for Ellie, but I also enjoyed them in Abby's story as well. And mainly because going back in those memories gave us a real feeling of safety, of comfort almost, where we could really feel safe, like our death wasn't immediately round the corner, right? Even though we know the fate of some of the characters in those memories, it just felt nice. Like when we were at the dinosaur museum and the space museum, the bit in the spacecraft, and like I said, with Tommy strumming the guitar and the bit in the aquarium, and yeah, just those flashbacks, just that nice feeling of safety, which we never really get in this world, right? And in the first game, we never really had. And so that was a nice change of pace at times to have those flashback sections. The game still builds up the world really well with stories from the past of characters we'll never get to meet, in the form of the handwritten letters and accounts of survivors, Seraphites, wolves, other people in the world, about the mistakes they've made, and there was a lot of foreshadowing for the themes that our main characters were going through, right? And like I remember that one letter when the wolves were taking over Seattle. That one guy whose daughter was killed by the wolves because she I think she had some like anti-wolf graffiti that she put up, and they actually killed her for it. And he held a grudge and was seeking vengeance against the wolves, like over such a, you know, it had some such foreshadowing for the main characters, for their kind of, I guess all vengeance is futile in a way, but yeah, in a kind of foreshadowing of the vengeance that they were seeking as well, and how it wasn't really going to fulfill anything. And there were lots of other small moments, you know, foreshadowing the rivalry between the Seraphites and the wolves, and the petty territorialism and tribalism that was going on, and how it you know, it was just going to only ever going to end up in tears, really. I really enjoyed reading those letters, how it fleshed out the story. And I remember mistakenly seeing that Sergeant Miller thing and thinking that there was going to be some kind of Army Joel version. That was really early in the game, that, but yeah, I wonder if they did that on purpose. But I guess taking maybe a bit more of a leaf out of Uncharted's book, there were some epic set pieces in the game, and the horror sections and the violence, it's all kind of been upscaled and it's really leveled up. You know, I think about that whole section in the underground train station with Ellie, where we were dealing with the wolves, and the first time we met the Shamblers with the red lights. It was really intense when we were crawling through the vents with Dina. Really awesome section. And then that whole bit with Abby and Lev, where we were ascending the skyscraper. Abby was facing a fear of heights. Then we had to descend the infested tower to get to the hospital, and we had the stalkers in the walls, the bloater at the bottom, and then let's not, of course, forget about the Rat King in the underneath the hospital. I only know he's called the Rat King because I had a look in the character model bits in the extras in the interim, and epic fight, scared me to death. My face was ridiculous. It was that ridiculous, guys. I actually thought about editing it out, like putting like a block over my face or something, because it just looks silly. Because that was terrifying. That was awesome. Yeah, really good set pieces, really scary sections. You know, I feel like all that's kind of leveled up a bit. So, really enjoyed those sections. And I suppose I feel like the way that you would enjoy this game the most is if you really focused on the personal stories of the characters and less on the plot. You know, I feel like there are quite a lot of plot holes and logical inconsistencies throughout both games. And I feel like you can get a bit bogged down in them. But I feel like if you focus more on the personal stories, I think that this could resonate a bit more, or a bit stronger with you. You know, if you really focus on empathize, which, you know, I feel like I've made I made a real effort to empathize with the characters' stories, even though I wasn't as interested in a revenge story. I feel like if you empathize with Ellie and Abby's troubled past and things that they've been through, you know, I feel like you might get the best experience with that kind of head on, rather than focusing on the plot, which could get a little bit frustrating in places. So those are a lot of the things that I really enjoyed. I think the game does well. That I think the game excels at. Obviously, you know, I said that the game technically is good, but obviously I ran into quite a lot of bugs, particularly that game-breaking bug early on. That's kind of inexcusable for a game this linear, that's been in development for this long, from such a high-profile studio. But it might have just been me. I attract bugs like no one's business. But yeah, it's worth mentioning, but it's not really going to affect your experience of the story or anything. Okay, so that's all the stuff I enjoyed. Now, there's only one thing that I kind of really disliked or hated in the game, and I'll talk about that a bit later. But a lot of the other stuff, I don't like hate it or really dislike it. I just feel it's a bit indifferent, or it didn't get much out of me. So I guess the first thing that I had a bit of a problem with, and I have been talking about this as I've been going along, has just been the pacing and the structure of this story. I feel like Ellie and Abby's story over these 3 days in Seattle would have built up and carried such better pace, and would have got us invested in certain side characters a lot more, and would have created more tension if we would have jumped between the characters more frequently, and not had these 2 blocks. And I don't know why they felt the need to separate the blocks this severely. And it makes it feel like some sections drag on a little bit too long, and makes the game feel like it's too long. You know, I was clocked in at about 35 hours come the end, which is probably about 12 hours longer than the first game. And regardless of your feelings towards the first game, one of the things that it did really well was it had such a good pace. It just kept moving. Not that it was too quick, but it just had a really solid pace. And this doesn't have that. It really doesn't. It just slows down in the wrong places. And I just want to speculate about, why did Naughty Dog structure it this way? Were they trying to manipulate our perspectives? Were they trying to... Were the dual perspectives there to create hatred from the player towards the antagonist of that perspective? Because when we're playing as Ellie, right, the antagonist from that perspective is supposed to be Abby. When you're playing as Abby, the antagonist of that perspective is supposed to be Ellie and her group, or, and Abby and her group from the other way. So I never really felt that way. So did they think that it was going to be more impactful than that? Because from the very beginning of this story, I never saw any of the characters as heroes or villains. Whereas I feel like they want you to see people that way. As soon as Joel died or was killed or whatever, one of the first things I started to say, and you can go back and listen, I said, right, well, I'm upset that Joel's dead, but these people haven't come here for no reason. He must have done something horrible to these people, or to Abby in particular. To seek him out, to only kill him, must have been something horrible, right? So I was trying to empathize with her straight away, so then I didn't really feel any hatred towards her. And then equally when I played as Abby, and I was meeting the other wolves, and I don't know, I didn't, it didn't really make me feel any hatred towards Ellie. And I didn't really see Joel and Ellie as these cape-wearing heroes in the first game. I've never really viewed anyone as particularly heroic in this world. There is no way to be heroic in this world. The people who try and uphold that sense of, that real old world sense of certain morals and refusing to kill people, likely just died in this world, right? So there are no heroes and there are no villains. And I just feel like the kind of element of hatred and vengeance was just kind of lost on me a little bit. It really didn't hit me too much. And it makes the game drag in a few sections where I feel like chopping between the perspectives would have been a bit more intriguing. And that leads me into the whole revenge being based on the Fireflies. Now, I was hoping that this was going to be kind of a bit more separate from the first game, and that's why I was speculating about, maybe Joel's done something in that, in that 20-year period before he met Ellie and all that stuff Tommy talked about. I've only got nightmares from the time we were together. I was kind of hoping it was something to do with that. Joel's got a dark past. So when it was revealed that it was all to do with the Fireflies, I'll admit I was a little disappointed. I was a bit deflated. And for that reason, I feel like this game maybe doesn't stand on its own two legs as much because of that, because it's so intimately tied to the player's feelings towards the ending and the whole experience of the first game. Maybe if you didn't play the first game, it might be a bit easier to feel hatred towards some of these characters because you don't have the opinions and the investments from the first game. But I feel like a lot of it is to do with the way you see the ending, right? The way you interpret characters in this game in particular will really rest on how you view the ending of the first game. And I mean, even from comments when I did the playthrough of the first game and some comments here, people still get so angry about what is right and wrong in the ending of the first game, and there really isn't a right and wrong. And we can have a discussion about fluctuating moralities, about contextual moralities, or about persistent moralities, right? We can have a deep discussion about that because, from Joel's perspective, They were killing a 14-year-old girl who he regarded as his daughter without her consent, right? And I feel like if you can't empathize with his decision, I don't see how you couldn't, right? A parent will always choose to save their child. The world be damned. And that's his point of view. And from his point of view, he did the right thing. But from the side of the Fireflies, you can see it from their point of view. You know, they've been struggling to survive under pressure from the military and the quarantine zones. They finally look like they've got this way to a cure. But they forsake their humanity to do so. They decide to kill her without asking her. And I know Marlene knows that that's what Ellie would wanted, and we know that Ellie would happily sacrifice, but they removed the choice. They removed the element of choice, and choice is important, right? And, you know, Jerry taking the... That was my problem at the end of the first game. If you go back and watch my opinion of that, I felt like the whole rushed surgery was a bit of a plot device. I still feel that way. If they just would have woke Ellie up for 5 minutes and said, "Kid, listen, we can make a cure, but we've got to cut into your brain and you're going to die. Are you okay with that?" And she would have said, "Yes, that's what's got to happen." That would have been it, right? But they removed that choice, so that's why it feels like a plot device to me, because it creates this controversy of Joel like getting rid of the cure and the Fireflies being immoral and inhumane by killing a child, and that's the issue. So if you side with Joel, if you think, "Oh, Joel did the right thing, they can't kill a child, they didn't even know they had a cure, they hadn't done tests, they hadn't taken tissue samples, all this stuff," then you probably feel like the whole revenge mission from Abby and the Wolves, it's all misguided, so you might be favouring their side. But if you see it from the side of the Fireflies, like no one life is more important than the lives of millions of people around the world, then you think what Joel's done is insane, that it's ridiculous, and that Abby's perfectly justified and the rest of the Wolves are perfectly justified in seeking vengeance on the guy who's just brought upon the apocalypse, right? So then that leads into your perception of morality. So do you see morality as a contextual notion where, so if you went back 500 years, right, the moral standards would be different. Life would be cheaper. Human life would be cheaper. People would not respect human life anywhere near the degree that they do now. Whereas in the present day, our morality is that all in you know, well, at least where I live, right, and in most developed places, you know, there's no death penalties. Like life is we attempt to preserve life at all costs, and nothing is worth more than a human life. So it's whether you believe that fluctuates, and in this world where life is again cheap, just like it would have been in whatever medieval times, Roman times, whatever, that life doesn't have the same value as it once did, then maybe you could side with the Fireflies. But you might have the belief that morality is a consistent, persistent, pervasive belief, and that every single life is valuable regardless of the time period and the circumstances, then you'd probably side with Joel, right? And the whole kind of argument of, oh, it's what Ellie would have wanted and all that stuff, that doesn't matter because she never says to them, she never gives them their consent, vocally, audibly gives her consent, right? That's the sticking point. So yeah, a lot of how I feel like you might be pulled into taking sides in this game is what I mean, is dependent on your view of that ending. I don't really lean either way. Like I said, I kind of feel like it's still a little bit divisive, and it has logical inconsistencies, right? Like if Marlene knew that's what Ellie would have wanted, then she could have just woken her up and gotten a consent. I mean, that feels like such a basic notion to me for them to just overlook it to create a controversy. Yeah, it's not bad writing, it's just kind of clumsy in my opinion, but yeah. So one of the things that I just found a little bit tedious at times was that I felt like the whole perspectives and seeing Ellie and Joel as these villains and all, which I like I said, I never saw them as heroes in the first place, particularly Joel. I mean, I felt like it was just done to death a little bit, and I'd been thinking about that already, and it felt like Naughty Dog was really trying to teach us a lesson. Like I said, in that whole combat section where we were playing as Abby fighting Ellie, just felt a bit patronising, you know? It's like, yeah, I get it, guys. I understand perfectly well that they're not heroes. Like, I've understood that. I understood that 35 hours ago. And it just made it feel a little bit pretentious, like they thought what they were conveying to us as players was so much more poignant than it really was. So it just fell a bit flat for me. I'm not saying that it's terrible. It just fell a bit flat. I was just like, oh, okay. It didn't really get much of a reaction out of me. So I feel like, you know, you can have a bit of a discussion about did the first game really need such an intimately tied sequel? Because I remember at the end of the first game, obviously I came to the first game very late, so I knew that they were making a sequel. But I did think, you know, does this even need a sequel? Because it was wrapped up, you know, not conclusively, but it, you know, the character arcs were fulfilled. We had a nice self-contained story. I'm not sure we really needed to deal with all the issues again, but that's just me. Maybe you felt like you really needed all those things resolved. You needed something that was closely tied. Not for me personally, but that's more of a personal thing. But maybe this makes this feel like the kind of awkward sequel, you know, where they don't really know where to go with it. So they kind of take a few risks. And I'd say that this would feel more like the awkward middle title in a trilogy, but that depends on whether you think Ellie has walked to her death into the woods, whether she might be walking and might be going for suicide. I don't know how off I am with that, but, you know, as someone with a background in psychology, you can't present someone with such piercing post-traumatic stress symptoms and not have suicide be a real reality in their mind. So it would be a very real concern. So that might be the end. But if there was a third game, as I was speculating before, how I thought this would end would be Ellie turning herself over to the Fireflies, finding some more doctors, and eventually, you know, fulfilling her destiny. You know, as she said, she's still waiting for her turn. You know, her and Riley were silly. They got bit. They got in some bad circumstances. And they, like I said, they wanted to lose their minds together. And she's supposed to have died so many times, and it's never got round to her. And, you know, you can say that Ellie made some bad decisions here, and the misguided vengeance tour and killing all the wolves and all that stuff is misguided. But as a full character arc, I'm reluctant to say the word victim, but she never asked for this life. She never asked for any of this. You know, it all just kind of happened to her. I know you can say the same for Abby, of course. She never asked for her father to be killed. But I just mean Ellie's circumstance as the immune person who's immune, right? So, yeah, it's whether there'll be another one, I don't know. I feel like they've left it open to that, but they were leaning so heavily on the post-trauma stuff, it would suggest that she's walked into the woods and ended it, to me. But that's open to interpretation. So it's not something that I necessarily dislike, but this being a revenge story, it makes it a little bit more difficult to get invested in, just because of the nature of vengeance, right? And because this is like a survival world, a post-apocalypse. You know, vengeance, you know, life is so cheap here that vengeance kind of seems a little bit frivolous in a way. And that really is at the core of the game. And like I said, I never really felt much anger towards any of these characters because I've always seen the villain in this world as the world. The scenario makes people do hideous things, so I don't really necessarily perceive individuals as evil. Of course, it can enable evil people to really show themselves, but it this world will make good people do hideous things. And it just took such a toll on Ellie. And I'm not sure it took much of a toll on Abby. She didn't show much remorse for any person that she killed. And that's not to say I think that she's a bad person. Abby was all fueled by this kind of righteousness where she thought any Seraphites she killed was because they're a death cult and they're loose in the head. It'd be a politically incorrect way of putting it, and they're murderous, they're controlling, and all that stuff. And just like she thought she was justified in killing Joel, justified in killing whoever. So, and that got a little bit tiring towards the end of the game, because I felt like the whole character arc with Lev would let her see that she's kind of been slowly losing her humanity, killing all these people, like Owen had told her. Like, Owen really was her voice of reason. She didn't have much of one on her own. And I guess that kind of leads into the Abby-Joel comparison I've been going on about in the last few videos. That apparently, I don't know whether you yourself have been comparing Abby and Ellie more. I understand that they have the similarity that they're seeking revenge because a father or father figure has been murdered, but that's really where the comparison ends for me with them. Like, Abby's character arc follows Joel's, like, pretty like beat for beat. Like, her whole journey in those 3 days is like a truncated version of Joel's journey over the 21 years. So they both lose a loved one in unfair circumstances. Abby loses her father, Joel loses his daughter. They go through a period of misguided rage, anger, killing during the apocalypse. Joel is surviving in hunters groups as a smuggler in the QZ for that 20 years, right? Did all sorts of hideous things that we don't know about. Abby was surviving with the wolves, at war with the Seraphites, the #1 Scar killer, as Mel said. So killing people left, right, and centre, and never feeling much remorse for doing any of it. Just like Joel didn't feel any remorse. Like when Tommy said to him, I've got nothing but nightmares from those days, and Joel said, we survived because of me. So he felt justified in it as well. Then they meet this child who they don't really want to be around. Abby doesn't want to be around Yara and Lev because they're still scars, even if they're apostates, they're still scars. They help each other out. They save her life. She leaves them alone. Joel picks up a job. He's got to transport this girl. He doesn't really like her. It's too dangerous. But then somewhere along the way, their hearts warm. They remember their humanity, and they come round, right? And then the child gets captured or lost somewhere, and they have to go on some sort of murderous rampage to rescue them. The world be damned, right? Because Abby is turning her back on her safety, on her group, on the wolves and the Seraphites. That whole area she's declared herself an enemy in, and so it's her and Lev against the world, just like it was Joel and Ellie against the world. So that's where it kind of leads me into how I feel about the characters specifically. So I've really tried to empathize with Abby's story, but like I said, with that comparison to Joel, she's a much colder character, just like Joel was. Like, I didn't necessarily like Joel in the first game. I empathized with his story and his circumstances, just like Abby, but he wasn't a particularly likable character. He was closed off, he was cold, remorselessly violent, like I said. And while he had character and personality and good qualities, I wouldn't necessarily call him likable. And I feel Abby's the same. I don't have anything against her, and I empathise with her struggles and the traumas she's gone through, but I don't think she's particularly likable. She's quite cynical. Like I said, she feels very little remorse for the people she's killed. I think that's a fairly objective assessment of both of them. And I think that one of this game's problems, just as a general experience, is that I feel like it suffers from a bit of a lack of personality, a bit of a lack of character, especially compared to the first game, right? When we look at the kind of enjoyable personalities we had in the first game, right? Outside of Joel and Ellie, You know, we had Tess, strong, independent, feisty, opinionated, really fun to be around. We had Bill, you know, paranoid, abrasive, but really interesting and fascinating. We had Henry and Sam, you know, felt like a kind of, again, a bit of a parallel to Joel and Ellie. They were just trying to survive. They had each other, and each other was everything. And without each other, they couldn't survive. And, you know, I mean, even David, right, as hideous as that guy was, just gave the game that bit of personality, right? Whereas here, I mean, who do we get? I mean, obviously Ellie's got a bright and bubbly personality. She's got lots of little intricacies and idiosyncrasies that we know. Dina was really fascinating learning about her family history and all that kind of stuff. And Owen, I really liked Owen. Owen had real soul. But besides those three, I mean, like I said, Abby, she's a bit cold. Outside, I mean, what do we really know about her? What insight do we get into her personality? I mean, she's scared of heights. She collects coins. She lifts weights. I mean, and the rest, you know, Jesse, I like Jesse, but we didn't really learn much about him. We didn't get much out of him. The rest of the wolves, I mean, good God. I mean, Manny, awful, no personality. Mel, just miserable, jealous, cynical. Nora, just childish and petty. And the rest of them. So I feel like there's a real lack of mature characters here. I mean, we have Tommy, but we don't really spend much time with Tommy, mostly in flashbacks and then a small part at the end. So that I feel like that adds to the pacing issue, is that there's just a lack of personality in the game, a lack of character, a lack of just interesting people to be around. And as I've said repeatedly, I'm not saying I dislike Abby, but because I don't want to get involved in a back and forth about I'm on Ellie's side, I'm on Abby's side, I'm on neither side, guys. I'm not sitting on the fence. I'm just saying I understand the point. There's no heroes and no villains, and that's how I've always seen it. But yeah, so I think that makes certain parts of this story a little less memorable, and most of all the deaths of the wolves, no resonance with me. Even after I got to know them, I really couldn't care less. Besides Owen, and you know, the tragedy of Mel being pregnant, obviously, but she was just miserable. So yeah, those were the things I kind of felt indifferent about. I'm just not sure if the game really got much of an emotional reaction from me, really. I'm not sure if I resonated with some of the things, and that's a personal thing. I'm not saying that it's bad. It's just I don't think some of the things resonated with me as I felt like they were intended to. I mean, I got a bit emotional when we were looking through Joel's house, but that's a fairly cliched thing. You know, if you were looking around the house of someone who's just passed, you know, you can get quite easily emotionally invested in that. And a lot of the flashbacks, I think a lot of the emotion was piled in. I don't, but at the same time, I don't think it was ever meant to be emotional in that kind of way throughout the main plot. It was so focused on vengeance and killing your enemies and all that stuff that I don't think it was ever meant to necessarily feel like that, I suppose. So what were the takeaways for me, I suppose? I mean, they were mostly just about the dissatisfaction of vengeance, right? About the kind of the cycle of violence that one act can create. Whether you see the beginning of this cycle as Joel or the Fireflies, I guess that, like I said, that depends on your opinion of the ending of the first game. If you think what Joel did was wrong, then Joel is the beginning of this whole cycle of vengeance and trauma. But if you see the Fireflies, what they were doing as wrong, which you could, then it all starts with them, and it all starts with Jerry, right? So it just depends on who you see as who's culpable. I don't really lean either way. I'm not trying to sit on the fence, honestly. if I had to choose, I don't know. I'd probably lean towards Joel because I feel like it's a bit more understandable. I feel like if they just would have said to Jerry, like, look, Jezza, just wake her up, have a chat, and then we'll get on with the cure, all right? And then we would have been all right. But no, he had to do it there and then. But yeah. I guess those are the takeaways. I'll just move on to the one thing that I severely disliked. And I feel, I have a background in psychology, and, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention this. And I really hate it when any game, any film, anything, uses mental illness as a crux, as a shtick, as a plot device. And it was no different here. Just really lazily implemented, a really selective depiction of post-traumatic stress that really raises no awareness, that doesn't shed any light onto that experience. And I find it quite insulting, to be honest. I felt the same way about Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice. I despised that game. Did absolutely nothing to depict anything resembling mental illness. And it feels the same here. Felt like a crux. And I really don't like that. Feels lazy. And throughout the course of history, like, mental illness gets represented in such cartoonish ways, and it's no different here. With all due respect, I have experience in this. So if you disagree with me on that, then I think you're wrong. And I just don't appreciate that. That's the one thing that I really hated. The rest of the stuff was, I think, some of it's personal taste, some of it's. I feel like the objective points that I think the objective problems would be the pacing and the slight lack of personality in some of the characters. I feel like those are things that are objectively kind of a bit rubbish. That wouldn't have taken much to fix, is what I mean. They could have structured the way that these stories were told a bit differently. Kept the stories exactly the same, just put them in a different order. And they could have given these characters some more personality. They could have, like, was it Eugene, the weed guy who died from a stroke, who lived in Jackson? We never met him, and he had more personality than any of the wolves. Any of them, right? And we didn't even meet him. He was dead. So yeah. And then I'll just talk about the kind of taking risks that they've. You should always applaud artists for taking risks. It doesn't always work, but they made some, I wouldn't call them bold, but they took some risks with the decisions where they tried to go with the reversing the player's perception of the protagonist from the previous game, or attempting to. Didn't really work with me necessarily, but people have to take risks, and you never know how it'll turn out unless you take these risks, right? So I wouldn't necessarily criticize them for taking the risk. At the very least, it's got us talking. It's got me talking. It's got us debating these issues, talking about, just everything that's happened in this story. It's got us talking, and you can praise it for that, right? Not all of the stuff worked for me. Might have worked for you, but I don't judge them for taking a few risks. Good art should do that, right? Okay, guys, I can't really think of anything else to say. I was supposed to say this at the start, but if you're going to offer some sort of comment or discussion, can we please keep it respectful? I have no interest in childish comments, or I know this is the internet and this is wishful thinking, but it upsets me. I have not enjoyed a lot of the discourse surrounding this game, even playing it inside this little bubble. Most of you have, I've enjoyed having a chat with you, but there's been some comments that have just made me want to stop uploading the playthrough, if I'm being honest. I started this channel. If you're still watching at this point, then that's up to you. But I started this channel to share my experiences in games, to interact with people I might not have met otherwise, because I was going through a tough time. I got sick, completely derailed my life, and I don't enjoy the kind of discourse that this game has brought out at times. So I would just say it's just a game. It's just a story. You're allowed to like it. You're allowed to dislike it. Calm the fuck down. All right? I don't want my comments to be as toxic as I'm worried they're going to be after discussing this game. And yeah, like I said, I'm being honest. I thought about just not putting this up. Like seriously, I don't want to be part of like toxic rhetoric. I really don't. I hate it. I still might not put this up. I don't know. But those are my thoughts on The Last of Us Part 2. I've enjoyed it, but I'm glad it's over. I am drained. I am ready for a sit down. I probably won't play this game again. But let me know your thoughts down below. I hope you have something interesting to say and you're not just trying to patronizingly explain the situation of the ending of the first game or any of this bullshit. So yeah, that's been The Last of Us Part 2. I hope you've enjoyed it in some way, shape or form. Leave me a like if you did, and just remember everybody, never trust an uncrate. I'll see you next time.